Sponsored by MaxAmps.com.
Hi, I'm Kevin Hetmanski, Technical Editor for Radio Control Car Action Magazine. And today on RCNet, I'm going to give you an exclusive first look at Kyosho's new Rock Force 2.2 rock crawler. The version of the truck I have here is a prototype, so some things may change, but we could take a look at it and show you what they have going so far. The Lexan body on the Rock Force is molded to look like a tuber type truck, and the rims aren't beadlocks like we're used to seeing on some rock crawlers. The tires have to be glued to them. They are 2.2 inches in size, and they use a 12mm hex to drive them. The tires here are Proline Badlands. We're not sure what tires are going to come with the truck, but for now we're testing it with the Proline Badlands. The Kyosho Rock Force uses a twin vertical plate aluminum chassis. There are holes cut out in it to reduce its overall weight. There are multiple mounting positions for the shocks and the lower and upper links on the chassis, so you can adjust it and fine-tune it to conditions. Underneath is a skid plate to protect the transmission when you're on the rocks, and it uses plastic cross members throughout to space the chassis. So you can see up here, the battery is mounted up front for better weight distribution for crawling, and behind it are the speed control and receiver. In some conditions, you want to limit the down travel of your suspension, so Kyosho was wise, and they did it with a wire tie instead of putting spacers under the pistons in the shocks. When you do it in the shocks, you got to remove the shocks, remove all the shock oil, take the shock apart, put your spacer in, put it all back together, and hope you got the right amount of downstop. But with this setup, you just put a wire tie in the hole in the axle and the hole in the chassis, and you can set it to whatever length you want. If you screw it up, you just throw another zip tie in, you're ready to go. The rear end of the Rock Force uses a standard 4-link suspension like we're used to see on our regular rock crawlers, but the front end's a little different. Because of the mounting location of the steering servo, they're unable to mount the upper links in the triangulated position like in the rear, so they use a 3-link suspension with a panhard bar. So you have the 2 basic lower links, an upper link, and then this panhard bar which keeps the axle centered in the chassis. And look at these links. This thing is built for rock crawling. These links are some of the beefiest I've seen. What really makes the Rock Force stand out from the rest of the rock crawlers out there are its axles. Most trucks use a bevel gear setup inside the axle housing, but this one uses a worm drive setup, which does a couple things for you. It allows for a lower gear ratio and uses smaller diameter gears to do so. The Kyosho Rock Force, you can get a high and low range gear set for the axle. And because it has a smaller diameter gear, it gives you more ground clearance underneath the pumpkin. Now I've opened one of the axles up so you can see inside. In the center here, you have steel gears for the worm drive and steel outdrive cups. And the drive cups spin dog bones which go to the outer hubs. And the outer hubs are borrowed from Kyosho's A-scale buggies. The rear axle is set up so that you can use optional parts to create a disconnect, which gives you front dig. The other advantage to having a worm drive in your axle is that it eliminates the need to have a speed control with drag brake. Basically, it locks the axle when it's not being driven. So when you're on an incline or decline, it'll hold the truck in place without the use of a brake or drag brake. As you can see, I'm pushing on the truck here and the tires aren't spinning at all, but the second you apply throttle, the truck will roll. For you custom guys out there, I know you're wondering, the axles measure approximately 9 inches from hex to hex. Because the majority of the gearing are in the axles, there's no need for a complex transmission. The Rock Force uses a simple pinion and spur gear setup, and the gear teeth are 48 pitch to allow for a wider range of gear ratios. The drive shafts are slider type units, but they have separate halves to them and they're connected by a piece of hex stock. This aluminum tube slides back and forth on the drive shafts to keep them in line. I got a lot of time with this truck already and I'm not sure I want to give it back to Kyosho. You can see this truck in the January '09 issue of Radio Controlled Car Action, and right now on the rocks.
Only at rccaraction.com.